You'll see a figure crossing a frozen forest, leaving deep tracks that vanish with the snowfall. A massive silhouette walking calmly along a mountain ridgeline at sunset. A pair of reflective eyes revealed for only a second in a flashlight beam before the camera jerks away. And in one case, a humanoid shape that actually stops and turns toward the camera as if it realizes it's being watched. These sightings aren't dramatic because of what happens. They're disturbing because of what doesn't. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe, because videos like this don't surface often. And once you see what these cameras captured, you may understand why so many people who encounter something like this never go back into the woods again. This thermal image was captured during a late-night sweep in dense forest using a handheld thermal camera. According to the team operating the equipment, nothing unusual had appeared for nearly 40 minutes. The forest was quiet. No active wildlife. No heat movement large enough to trigger concern. Then this figure appeared between the trees. At first, the operator thought it was a bear standing upright, but that explanation didn't last more than a few seconds. Bears don't hold posture like this. They sway. They shift. This figure didn't. One of the researchers quietly said, "That's not an animal. It's just standing there." The heat signature shows a consistent temperature across the torso, arms, and legs, with no distortion from overlapping animals or vegetation. The arms hang unusually low, extending far past the waist, and the head appears forward set on the shoulders. What's most unsettling is the way the figure is positioned, partially concealed behind trees, yet clearly oriented toward the camera. Another team member later recalled, "It felt like it knew exactly where we were, not reacting, just watching." When the camera zoomed slightly, the figure did not flee. Instead, it shifted subtly, remaining obscured while staying visible in the thermal frame. Moments later, without any visible running or rapid movement, the heat signature dropped and faded into the background as if it crouched and moved downhill. There were no sounds recorded, no breaking branches, no secondary heat trail. Reviewing the footage afterward, investigators noticed something chilling. For several seconds before the figure fully appeared, the surrounding forest showed faint heat displacement, as if something large had already been standing there just outside the camera's view. Whatever this was, it wasn't passing through. It was already there, waiting. This video was recorded by a stationary trail camera placed along a narrow forest corridor frequently used by wildlife. The camera had been active for months, capturing deer, coyotes, and the occasional bear without incident. Nothing about the location suggested human traffic, especially not at this hour. At approximately 3:14 in the morning, the camera triggered again. What crossed the frame immediately stood out. The figure enters from the left, already upright, already in motion. At first glance, some assumed it was a bear, but bears don't walk like this. The gait is slow and deliberate, with long, even strides. The back remains upright. The head stays level. There's no sway, no drop to all fours, and no hesitation typical of animals reacting to infrared light. One reviewer quietly remarked, "That looks like a person, but there's no way it's a person." The arms hang unusually low, swinging past the knees, with slight motion blur that suggests significant mass. The stride length alone exceeds what would be expected from any known wildlife in the area. Most unsettling is what doesn't happen. The figure never looks at the camera. It doesn't pause. It doesn't speed up. It doesn't react at all. Another investigator later said, "It walked through like it owned that path, like it had done it 100 times. As the figure exits the frame to the right, it maintains the same pace, disappearing into the tree line without sound. No snapped branches, no follow-up movement. The forest returns to stillness almost immediately. When the footage was reviewed frame by frame, no clothing details, reflective markers, or equipment could be identified. There were also no nearby roads, camps, or trails that would explain a human presence at that time. Whatever crossed that clearing wasn't startled. It wasn't lost. It was simply passing through. This footage was captured just before nightfall, during the final minutes of usable light. The person recording wasn't searching for anything unusual. They were filming the tree line while hiking back toward their vehicle, documenting how quickly fog was rolling in from the low ground. The camera shakes slightly, not from panic, but from cold hands and low light. Focus drifts in and out as the lens struggles with the haze. That's when something shifts at the edge of the trees. At first, it's easy to miss, a darker shape against darker shadows. But then it steps forward, only partially. The figure never fully leaves the cover of the forest. One shoulder, then the outline of a head, followed by the upper torso. It pauses there, long enough for the camera to catch its height and shape, taller than a man, broader than the surrounding trunks, bent slightly forward, as if adjusting to uneven ground. The person filming whispers, "Do you see that?" but doesn't move closer. The camera zooms instinctively, then pulls back, unsure. The figure doesn't react. It doesn't charge. It doesn't retreat in panic. It simply stands there, motionless, letting the fog move around it. Then, just as quietly as it appeared, it steps backward, not turning away, not dropping down, just reversing into the trees until its outline dissolves into mist and shadow. The forest looks normal again, almost immediately. No sound follows, no broken branches, no sudden movement. When the person reviewed the video later, they said the most disturbing part wasn't what the camera captured. It was what it didn't. There was no blur of escape, no hurried movement. Whatever stepped out didn't need to rush. It had already decided how long it wanted to be seen. This video was recorded during a daytime hike along a narrow creek that cuts through dense woodland. The person filming was moving slowly, using the brush along the bank for cover, documenting water levels after recent rainfall. Nothing about the moment felt unusual until movement appeared upstream. At first, it looked like a shadow breaking the surface of the water. Then the shape stood upright. The figure entered the creek without hesitation, wading straight through the current. Water splashes against its legs, rising to the knees, but it never stumbles or adjusts its footing. Each step is placed with purpose, as if the creek bed is already familiar. The arms hang low, swinging just above the waterline, heavy and relaxed, not lifted for balance like a human crossing slippery rocks would do. The camera trembles slightly as the person filming shifts behind leaves and branches. You can hear their breathing change. They whisper something under their breath, then stop talking entirely. The figure doesn't look toward the camera. It doesn't scan the banks. It keeps moving forward, crossing the creek at a diagonal, shoulders hunched slightly, head angled down just enough to suggest focus rather than fear. What stands out most is the scale. The water reaches higher on its legs than expected, yet the stride never shortens. Each step sends a dull splash outward, steady and rhythmic, not rushed. It moves like something that isn't worried about being seen or chased. As it reaches the opposite bank, the figure slows, pausing only briefly before stepping up out of the water. Leaves and branches obscure it almost immediately, but its outline remains visible long enough to register the width of the shoulders and the length of the arms before it disappears into the trees. The creek continues flowing. Birds resume calling. Later, the person who recorded this said the most unsettling part wasn't seeing it cross the water. It was realizing how exposed it had been the entire time, and how little that seemed to matter. This video was recorded at night using a handheld flashlight during a solo walk through dense woods. The person filming had already turned around once, uneasy about how quiet the forest had become. No insects, no wind, just footsteps and breath. The camera shakes as the flashlight beam sweeps across the trees, jumping from trunk to trunk. Leaves flare white, then vanish into black. Nothing holds the light for more than a second, until it does. 2 points reflect back. Not low to the ground, not moving side to side like an animal's. They appear higher than expected, spaced wider apart, catching the beam only for a split second before dimming. The light drifts upward and freezes. Part of a shape resolves against the darkness. A shoulder, the edge of a head, something tall, standing just beyond the nearest trees. The breathing on the audio changes immediately, faster, sharper. The person whispers, "No, no," without finishing the thought. The flashlight trembles, illuminating bark, then slipping back toward where the eyes were. They reflect again, brighter this time, as if the angle has changed. What's visible isn't enough to identify features, but it's enough to understand scale. The figure isn't crouched. It isn't peering from behind a tree. It's upright, still, waiting within the darkness rather than moving through it. The camera jerks violently to the side. Motion blur smears the trees into streaks. Footsteps retreat. The flashlight swings wildly, never settling back on the spot where the eyes appeared. Later, the person who recorded this said they didn't remember deciding to turn around. Their body reacted before their mind caught up. They also said something that stuck with investigators. "I don't think it moved when I saw it," they said. "I think it was already looking at me." The video ends seconds later, cutting off mid-breath. No follow-up footage was ever recorded from that area. This footage was recorded from several miles away using a high-zoom lens during the final minutes of daylight. The person filming had stopped to capture the sunset along a remote mountain range when movement along the ridgeline caught their attention. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a distortion caused by haze and distance. Then the shape kept moving. The camera zooms in, struggling to hold focus. The image softens, colors wash out, and the ridgeline blurs, but the figure remains distinct, upright, tall, walking steadily against the sky. What stands out immediately is the pace. The figure doesn't hurry. It doesn't pause to scan the slope or adjust footing. It moves with a slow, even stride, arms swinging naturally at its sides. Each step carries it forward along uneven terrain without hesitation, as if the elevation and exposure mean nothing to it. The person filming whispers in disbelief, questioning whether it could be a hiker, but the scale doesn't match. No gear is visible, no pack, no trekking poles, and no human would choose that route so late in the day, with night approaching and no clear trail along the ridge. As the camera shakes from the extreme zoom, the figure continues on, silhouetted cleanly against the fading sky. At one point, it appears to angle slightly uphill, maintaining balance without slowing. There's no sign of fatigue, no stumble, just constant forward motion. What unsettles viewers most is how exposed it is. The ridgeline offers no cover, no concealment, yet the figure makes no effort to hide. It doesn't look back toward the valley. It doesn't acknowledge the vast open space beneath it. Eventually, the haze thickens and the figure blends into the ridgeline, becoming indistinguishable from rock and shadow. The camera holds on the spot long after it's gone. Later, the person who recorded this said the distance was the most disturbing part. It wasn't close enough to fear, they said, but it was far enough to feel like it didn't care if anyone saw it at all. This video was recorded in midwinter, deep in a conifer forest following an overnight snowfall. The camera was set up earlier in the day to document animal movement along a known migration route. Snow muffles everything out here: sound, distance, even urgency. The footage begins quietly. Trees sag under fresh snow. Light flakes drift past the lens. Then movement appears between the trunks. The figure emerges slowly, partially obscured by falling snow and branches. It doesn't rush. It doesn't break into a run. It moves the way something moves when it knows the terrain well enough not to hurry. Each step sinks deep into the snow, compressing it with visible weight before lifting cleanly out again. What stands out isn't the size alone. It's the consistency. The stride never shortens. The arms hang low and swing gently, almost brushing the sides of the legs. Snow clings to its body but doesn't seem to slow it down. There's no sign of discomfort, no adjustment to the cold, no reaction to the environment that would suggest vulnerability. For a brief moment, tracks are visible behind it, deep impressions that hold their shape before filling in with fresh snowfall. Then the angle changes, and the prints disappear from view. The figure passes between two trees and fades into the forest, swallowed by snowfall and shadow. No sudden movement marks its exit. The scene simply returns to stillness. When the footage was reviewed later, the person who set the camera said the quiet bothered them more than the image itself. It didn't look like it was surviving the winter, they said. It looked like it belonged to it. The camera continues recording long after the figure is gone. Snow keeps falling, the forest keeps standing, and the place where it crossed slowly disappears, everything erased except the knowledge that something heavy passed through there and left without effort. This footage was captured by a vehicle dashcam in the early hours of the morning on a remote forest road. There were no nearby towns, no streetlights, and no reason for anyone to be walking that stretch of road at 3 in the morning. The driver had been traveling alone for over an hour. The road empty except for drifting fog and the steady hum of the engine. As the headlights push forward into the darkness, something appears at the edge of the beam. At first, it looks like a trick of shadow, fog folding in on itself, branches bending toward the road. Then the vehicle slows. The shape doesn't move. Standing just off the shoulder is a tall figure, broad and upright, partially illuminated by the headlights. Its outline is wrong for a person. Too wide through the shoulders, too thick through the legs. No reflective material, no clothing lines, just a solid, uneven silhouette absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. The driver can be heard breathing faster, whispering something unintelligible. The car slows further, almost coasting. The figure remains still, as if waiting for the vehicle to close the distance. Then it turns. Not fully, just enough to suggest awareness. A slight shift of the upper body, a change in angle. The movement is slow, controlled, and deliberate. There's no panic, no flinch from the headlights, no reaction you'd expect from an animal caught in the open. As the fog thickens, the figure steps back, slipping beyond the reach of the beams. One moment it's there, clearly defined against the road. The next, it's gone, swallowed by darkness and trees without sound. The vehicle doesn't stop, it doesn't turn around. It keeps moving forward. Later, the driver said the most disturbing part wasn't seeing it. It was how long it stood there, exposed, as if it knew the car would slow down. "It didn't jump out," they said. "It let me come to it." This footage was recorded using night vision equipment during a controlled overnight observation in dense woodland. The camera operator had been stationary for several minutes, scanning slowly between tree trunks, documenting movement patterns and ambient conditions. Up until this moment, nothing larger than small animals had appeared. The figure enters the frame quietly, moving left to right between the trees. At first, it behaves like distant wildlife, steady movement, no abrupt changes, partially obscured by branches. The graininess of the night vision makes details difficult to resolve, but the size is immediately apparent. It is tall, broad, upright. The operator continues filming, assuming the figure will pass through and disappear like the others. It doesn't. Mid-step, the figure stops. Not suddenly, not startled, but decisively. Its body remains facing forward, but the head turns, slowly, deliberately. The movement is subtle enough that it's almost missed the first time watching the footage. Then the eyes catch the infrared light. Two bright reflections appear, fixed directly on the camera's position. The figure doesn't advance. It doesn't retreat. It simply stands there, acknowledging the observer without reacting to the equipment itself. The audio captures a faint shift, static interference rising slightly, the operator's breathing changing. No words are spoken. The camera remains locked on the figure, as if moving might confirm something neither side wants to test. After several seconds, the footage cuts abruptly. There's no pan away, no explanation, just a sudden end. Later, the operator explained why. "I didn't stop recording because it scared me," they said. "I stopped because it noticed me, and I realized that whatever it wasn't just walking through the forest. It was checking to see who was watching." The video has never been extended or enhanced. Investigators say the moment the head turns is enough, because once something acknowledges the camera, the encounter is no longer accidental. What makes these 9 sightings so unsettling isn't the footage itself. It's the pattern they create when viewed together. Different locations, different cameras, different people, yet the same towering shape, the same deliberate movements, and the same eerie lack of reaction to being seen. If these were hoaxes, they would be chaotic. Instead, they're consistent. Whatever these cameras captured, it didn't behave like an animal, and it didn't behave like a human either. It moved as if it belonged there, and we didn't. If you've ever experienced something unexplained in the woods, you're not alone. And if you haven't, after watching this, you may think twice before going back.